Hello, Chris here. Just a warning about this episode. As we've said on the podcast before, what we do is just kind of find a subject and then read about it and react to it as we go online. This one, it turned out, actually had some quite depressing real life stuff attached to it. I mean, it's not anything you wouldn't see on the news or anything, but if you are particularly sensitive, beware. Like I say, it's not terrible, but thought it'd be a good idea to give you a heads up. All right, here's the episode. Goodbye.
I want to good boys, Neil and Chris on the internet one day. Chris said to Neil, let's make a podcast, boy. Come on now, what do you think? Well, what will this podcast be about? Said Neil with a tear in his eye. About stories that people tell each other from Louisiana Pie to the city of Mumbai. Oh, you mean urban legends. And the podcast was Urban Legends with Neil and Chris. You take care, y'all.
Good day. Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Urban Legends, the number one-stop shop for all of your urban legends or urban legends adjacent needs. I am Renaissance Fair blacksmith, Chris Flynn. With me, as always, is someone who's simply mad about wild swimming. It is Mr.
Neil Herbert.
Hi, Neil Herbert. How are you?
I'm doing all right. I want to hear more about your Renaissance Fair work. Was it blacksmithing?
Blacksmithing, yeah.
So, is it real fire and iron, or do you just have do you just cosplay that with some orange cardboard?
Yeah,
and mallet's mallet.
Yeah, no, it's not one of those like a light bulb with a fan and bits of cloth blowing upwards to look like flame. No, I use real flames. What I like to do is make very dull swords that I sell for thousands of pounds. That's good. Suits of armour for people who are doing jousting on like hobby horses, kind of thing.
Yeah, that's nice. Yeah.
Yeah,
or maybe for a bit of Quidditch. That's the sort of thing people like these days.
That kind of thing. Yeah, wands. Make some wands. Yeah. Crowns and tiaras for people who want to pretend. Yeah, the thing you'll find,
bit classy, isn't it? It's nice.
Very classy. What you find in Renaissance fairs is most people like to dress up as lords and ladies, of which that would have been a very, very small percentage of the population. Yeah. Not many of them like to dress in rags and roll around in pig shit.
Not many doing peasant cosplay then.
Not a lot of peasant cosplay. No, everyone's lords and ladies or knights or that kind of thing. I do lucky horseshoes. That's good. That's nice, isn't it? Hang that above your door. Keeps away
spirits as well, doesn't it?
Keeps away the spirits or invites them in.
Yeah, up to you.
If you want them in, yeah.
Turn them upside down.
Open, close.
Come in the devil.
Close.
That's fine.
Yeah, exactly. Depends how you feel. You know, it's been a busy day. Closed. I want to have a pie and a lie down. You're a bit bored.
It's most nice for me.
Yeah, that's exactly it. So all sorts really. A lot of money in it. You know, a lot of people want a
lot of people with low standards and high expenditure.
Very low standards. Yeah. I'll be honest with you. If you hit two of the swords together, they instantly shatter.
Yeah.
So I'm not exactly using Damascus steel. I'm using I'm melting down.
Literally steel, are you? You're melting down supermarket trolleys, aren't you?
Supermarket trolleys. Yeah. Old
tempering them with old packets of Space Raiders.
Yeah, old tins. Yeah. Old tins that I steal out of the recycling. Pots and pans.
It's recycling, basically, isn't it?
I'll be honest with you. I say blacksmith a lot of the time. I just cut eye holes into pots and pans and sell them as armour. But it's all right. It's a little side hustle. Respect the grift.
Exactly.
And Neil, how did you get so crazy about wild swimming? Could I ask?
Well, let's just say there was an incident at the local pool. We're not going to talk about it.
So no longer had access to swimming.
Access to swimming in the conventional manner was removed. Let's start there.
Right.
We'll move swiftly on. But then you think, actually, why would I want to pay, I don't know, £5 or whatever to go and
Probably.
To go and micturate.
It's been a while since I went to a local ball.
When I can just go and do that in the wilds, in the beautiful, beautiful wilds.
Is it true to say that on almost every occasion the emergency services have had to be called out at great cost to the taxpayer to rescue you because you didn't really know about river currents and that kind of thing?
Correlation is not causation, Chris. They did have to come out.
Often getting swept away.
If that's how I like to exit a body of water, that's up to me, I think.
With one of those silver blankets round you being lifted by a helicopter.
I'll get one of those, what are they called, dry robes?
Right.
I want one of those. I insist on being wrapped around one of those.
Oh,
Got to keep the image up. Have you heard this what they call it, the dry robe wankers?
No.
So,
is that a new gang?
Yeah, well, apparently. So these, have you seen that? There's like the big bulky coats, and they've got like a towel on the inside. And they were apparently it was somebody who did wild swimming, and he invented them. As I know, because I'm a passionate wild swimmer.
Yeah. Was it you?
So you go wild swimming. Maybe it was.
Maybe.
I think they're British actually, but yeah, they've kind of become
sounds
trendy.
About right.
Wear them down the supermarket. Well, the idea was it was like a big bulky thing, so you could like
it's got a towel inside.
You put it over yourself, and then you could get changed underneath, and sort of like, but then still,
What's wrong with just getting changed in front of loads of people, like normal swimming pools?
Well, no, because the whole point is this was like if you're swimming in the sea or somebody somewhere outdoors. So, you don't want to be flashing the neighbours or what have you.
Well, you're meant to swim naked if you're doing proper wild swimming, as you know.
I mean, generally I get greased up, a bit of olive oil and a bit of baby oil and
duck,
slip under the waves.
Duck fat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do pop a little propeller up somewhere to give myself a bit of extra thrust. That's not clothing, is it? That's
like a terrible Inspector Gadget.
Yeah.
Where's your favourite wild swimming spot? Is it the River Adur?
No, it's our local reservoir.
I did wonder why the water was coming through brown.
Funny, some minerals I can't quite identify. Yeah.
All right. Well,
apparently it's getting a bit more processing these days, but again, it's
well, there's only
right,
so much
right to roam, right to swim. That's what I said.
There's only so much chlorine in the world, isn't there?
Only so much it can do.
So, Neil, this week we're going to have a little look at a proper urban legend, but it's an interesting one because it's also got some basis in like a Venn diagram. It's got urban legend, fact, and also found footage movie, and it all kind of blurs together.
It's like a Victoria sponge made out of bullshit and fact.
Well, that's what I always say to people when I'm in a bakery. What's that made of? Bullshit and facts. No, it's flour and jam, mate.
Some macaroon, mates.
Well, can you leave the shop?
Yeah.
So I'm going to be primarily reading from an article on classic New York history.com, and it's by Virginia Repka Franco, which is a nice Croatian/Spanish name. And it's called The History of Willowbrook and the Terrifying Legend of Cropsey. So I'm gonna read mainly from this article because it's already been written, so might as well let them do the heavy lifting.
Do the heavy lifting as per usual.
As per usual, low effort podcast. Yep. Hey, I'm doing the talking. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
It takes more energy to talk than type.
If they converted it into speech themselves, then they could podcast it, couldn't they? And probably already have, but which is to steal it, which is to sample it, and that's
Exactly. It's just we're giving them, we've named them, we're giving them free advertising.
Some innovation is effectively just doing the same thing someone else has done, but in a slightly worse format. So that's...
Well, if you didn't know that
not
by
always
now.
good. Yeah.
No. I think that as we can see in the world at the moment, regressing is the way forward.
Yeah.
So, are you ready, Neil?
I've never been readier, Chris.
Feel free to jump in whenever you like, but put your hand up first, and I'll invite you in.
Be doing the former, I won't be doing the latter.
Yes. Okay. So, before the advent of creepypasta, the name derived.
Right, I'll stop you there.
The name derived from cut and paste online scary stories. Urban legends were told in an old-fashioned oral tradition.
Wait a minute, Chris. You mean to tell me that creepypasta wasn't the origin of all of these stories?
What, of myths
there were
and
stories
legends?
around before
the internet.
The internet.
Well, I mean, this is news to me because...
But without an information superhighways, how were they able to communicate these stories?
I mean, as far as I was...
to believe, like, mouth to mouth?
As far as I was aware, the Bible didn't start until the internet, because it's a kind of creepypasta. So, city dwellers... So what's happening here is they're giving us a little bit of colour of what an urban legend is.
Explaining what an urban myth is, and that's
and nice, do you know what, Neil? I think that's maybe something...
Hey, don't assume everyone knows.
I think that's something that Urban Legends, the podcast about urban legends, has maybe not done yet in the 50-plus episodes.
We normally spend half an hour talking about something irrelevant. We could actually try and explain.
I couldn't think of anything irrelevant. That's the only reason why I'm jumping in so quickly.
We got straight in. Yeah.
I'm not happy about it.
No,
I'm really not happy about it. I might not even release this one now. So, city dwellers who went off to camp or moved to the suburbs no doubt heard of the story of that guy with the hook. That's how it's spelled.
He's got a hook hand, has he?
Well, sounds like it, doesn't it? But
that's promising.
Let's read on. He was going to come and get you. He lived in the woods. The story usually starts with some ad-lib prequel setup narrative about how a guy killed his family in grisly fashion and then was put away. Then one night, he escaped. He's out there waiting to get ya.
I imagine that was a dark and stormy night, Chris.
Do you reckon? I reckon it was a really bright evening.
Bright sunny day.
Bright sunny day. Yeah, birds chirping.
And he's like, the sun's gleaming off of his hook, and he's like, this will be a good day to go killings.
Yeah, I mean, like...
It was a beautiful day.
I mean, the fact...
He's dancing around with his hook, slashing nations.
Look, the fact that he's a murderer doesn't mean that he's not also affected by seasonal affective disorder. He probably enjoys the sun just like the rest of us.
Else, yeah. He knows the value of vitamin D.
What you do, yeah, if you're going, he only hangs around darts or nights, what you're doing is you're othering him or her. And I don't think that that's helpful when it comes to maybe... hands across the ocean.
If we aren't going to deal with the fictional murderer problem,
finally,
how are we going to deal with it? Then
we need to open a productive dialogue
by alienating fictional serial killers. Is then he's going to make them serial kill more?
Exactly. It's stupid, isn't it? How do you deal with a serial killer with a hooked hand? Two serial killers with hooked hands.
A serial killer with two hooks. Hooks on his feet as well.
A hook with serial killers for hands.
And in the final move, a hook for a head.
Oh no, it's Hookhead. Just keeps getting caught on branches. Right. As most of the facilities that house the mentally ill and developmentally challenged were built on remote rural acres, you could insert the name of any local collection of rambling buildings run by the New York Department of Mental Hygiene into the story. The guy with the hook, or the axe, or knife, or whatever, had no proper name in my area.
I see you've gone with the Brooklyn accent there.
Well, it's New York, isn't it?
It's a big state.
Well,
fair enough.
Not really. But what do you want me to do? What do you want me to do? The Albany accent?
Yes.
Okay, hello, I'm from Albany. There you go. Perfect.
There you go. Wonderful.
When my family moved from the Bronx up to the country, we lived right near Harlem Valley State Hospital. So for us, the escape maniacs of our nightmares came from there. Driving down Route 22 through Wingdale at night, you would fear that you would check your rearview mirror and he would be there, hiding in your back seat. This maniac also apparently had a thing for killing gas station attendants and donning their uniforms.
No, I'm not down with this. Like, if you want to go serial killing, fair enough.
Fair enough. That's your right.
Gas station attendant. Yeah, exactly. That's your right by law. I think it's the Third Amendment? Or
that's the Third Amendment.
Yeah. If they didn't want it to happen, they wouldn't have put it in the Constitution.
Exactly.
So clearly, would they? Must have an assault rifle and must be able to use it at all times. However, I'm pretty sure. I'm paraphrasing, but I'm pretty sure that's what.
I think that's the gist. I'd call that the gist of it.
The gist of it, yeah. Moider each other as much as possible. But, some gas station attendant, they're just there to sort of help you out. Do a bit of,
but I mean, I would say that,
much.
although not necessarily that, I don't think that's the victim, but I'd say that would be a bridging murder to get you to where you need
build
to
yourself up, or it's just a tactical thing. You
it's
go
a
and put the
tactical
uniform
thing.
on,
You need to get the
get in the car.
How else do you get a uniform? You got to kill someone. You can't.
It's like a game of Hitman, isn't it?
Yeah, it's literally it's like that.
Do you know what? Fair enough, serial killers. I retract my comment. I see your logic.
Means to an end. Yeah. Means to an end, Neil.
Yeah. I was reacting emotionally, Chris, and they've thought logically
Neil,
there. So
this podcast is not a place for emotions. This is a place for
pure white hot logic. Ice cold logic, whatever.
Exactly.
As long as it's not lukewarm
Vulcan
logic, we're
style,
fine.
white hot logic. That's all we're here for. This maniac also... Oh, I've read that. He could pump your gas with one arm.
What is it? Oh, not considered yoke, is it?
Oh, I'm having a good night. And then reach in and grab you with his other appendage. Those lucky enough to escape, or unlucky,
just toying with you,
would find a bloody hook latched onto their wing window. The plethora of stories seem to have gained traction as more and more city kids were transplanted into the suburbs.
I'll tell you what, those hook hands don't come cheap, so he's going to be a bit annoyed that that's come off.
Where instead of museums and other cultural attractions, they had local institutions looming large on the green landscape. Despite being New York's smallest borough, Staten Island, home of the Wu-Tang Clan, I'd like to add, had more than its share of such institutions. The New York Farm Colony, as a home where the indignant could earn their keep, and Seaview Hospital, a place for tuberculosis patients, were located right near Willowbrook. Acres and acres of crumbling old buildings had lots of history. Once abandoned, all sorts of folks from kids out for a good time and ghost hunters invaded the grounds. The 80s were in the grip of the satanic panic, which we've discussed before.
Yeah.
And
entirely.
Yeah, well, like now, we're in a grip of it to an extent with QAnon. And it was said that Willowbrook was where the devil worshippers had their black masses on a makeshift altars garnered from the ruins. Sounds all right, doesn't it?
Yes.
Would you go to Would you go to a black mass?
I've been to some normal masses. They were. Do I have to kneel down on pews? Because I wasn't keen on that bit.
Nah, not a black mass. No. You break dance.
Oh.
Would you go to a black mass if there was a girl there that you fancied?
Oh, yeah, bound to.
Yeah, of course. I don't believe in anything except for kissings. So the kids from Staten Island, however, had a more personal story. A local maniac had a name, Cropsey.
Mm.
They also had the depressing legacy of Willowbrook State School in their borough. In the 70s and 80s, they had a string of mysterious child murders. Staten Island hit an eerie trifecta for ingredients of a horrifying legend to take on a real-life terrifying twist.
So Cropsey is a weird name for a...
Cropsey.
Yeah. It sounds like the mascot for some genetically modified wheat or something.
Get your Cropsey bread.
Cropsey's here to say he's trying to eat this genetically modified maize or whatever. So they shouldn't do advertising jingles off the top of my head. I could work that one out, though.
So how Staten Island's got this particular name for the maniac is unknown. It's simply, maybe he had short hair.
Just try a bit harder, I would say.
He might, and then short crop.
It could be called Buzzy or something. They call it buzz cuts, don't they, in America?
Yeah. Buzzy boy. Mr. Buzz.
Buzzy crops.
Hey, Buzzy Craps. Oh, watch out. Buzzy Craps will get you. In 1981, in the 1981 film, The Burning, brought Cropsey to life in a slasher film. New York filmmaker Harvey Weinstein was one of the original story writers, no doubt getting some inspiration from campfire tales he'd heard as a child.
No doubt, from his real life experience.
No doubt he was Cropsey.
Was it? So is that the actual... I'm assuming that's the same Harvey Weinstein.
Mm-hmm.
The
terrible sexual assaulter.
Sexual assault.
Yeah.
I thought he just did the production. I didn't realise he had actually made films.
Yeah, it looks like it.
And attempts. Yeah, we won't focus on it.
No. In this version, I mean, there's only so scary we can go, really.
Yeah, exactly. No,
difficult to have a chuckle fest about a serial rapist. Yeah. So, in this version of the urban legend, Cropsey is a disfigured camp counselor out for revenge. There may be many versions of the story, but Cropsey seems to belong to New York, like the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man and the Ghostbusters.
So this sounds a bit like it might have influenced Friday the 13th. Because your man Jason was a sort of disfigured fella.
Was he a camp counsellor?
No, he murdered camp counsellors.
All right. So why is that?
Didn't
like counselling.
No, it's convoluted. It turns out in the first one it wasn't him, it was his ma who was killing everyone, and it's because apparently some camp counsellors, he drowned in a lake while they were having it off.
Right.
So she murders them, and then every time kids come in to smoke weed and get laid, then she just remembers her son being killed because of the negligence of the camp counsellors and goes on a killing spree.
But doesn't it turn out that he actually can't be killed?
Well, yeah, because his mum gets moided in the first one. So the twist is it's his mum in the first one, and then she gets beheaded, and then he comes back to life somehow. And then
guillotine, was it? Guillotine?
I believe it was a spade. Held by the final lady.
Well, the working man's guillotine.
It's not a good movie. Yeah, like the final girl's there, and then I think she sort of like chops her head off with I can't remember. Maybe there was a machete involved. I think it was a bad movie. And then after that, they're all him, aren't they? And he's got like his Mars head on a little plinth, and he's like going around.
That's fair enough.
Yeah, like you would do, wouldn't you?
Yeah, bronze it, chrome it,
yeah,
stick it up on the mantelpiece. So Cropsey is also the title of a brilliant documentary filmed by two Staten Islanders, http //cropseelegend.com/ who grew up hearing the legend. The award-winning film documents the legend of Cropsey in the context of the convicted kidnapper Andre Rand, who worked as an orderly at Willowbrook from 1965 to 1966. It's not a very long time, is it? A year?
You're doing something bad like killing the patients, by any chance?
Yeah, I suppose so. I mean, I would have, written warning. Everyone knew something about Willowbrook State School. Opened in 1938, it served as a home for disabled children until it was used as an army hospital during World War II. After the war, it was reopened again as Willowbrook School, and the population of students swelled to unmanageable proportions. Willowbrook was called a school, but it was nothing more than a warehouse for the developmentally disabled. Robert F. Kennedy had called Willowbrook School a snake pit back in 1965. That's helpful, isn't it?
I'd hope he was talking about the way it was being run and organised rather than, I mean, he was generally he seemed like a reasonable geezer. Probably the best of the Kennedys, I would have thought. I would hope he was talking about how it was being run rather than having a crack at the kids.
Developmentally,
you would certainly,
I don't think that's it. But I don't think, just going, I snaked it. I mean, just close it. Do you know what I mean? Put some more money into social care.
He tried to, but then the mafia killed him. That's what happened, Chris.
That was it.
They were getting all that sweet money out of them.
I thought he was killed by Cropsey.
Well, maybe they got Cropsey to do their bidding. Oh, you thought it was Jack Ruby, did you? I know that was the other one, the other Kennedy. Those Kennedys aren't careful, are they?
Nah. If you look very carefully, you can see that actually, when they think he's being shot, what it is it's a hook coming from the boot of the car going through.
That's why if you see the Zack Ruder footage and you see his head sort of snap to the right, if you look carefully, you'll see a hook swatting the back of his head.
That's exactly what happens.
To the right, yeah. So you thought it was a magic bullet. No, it's
it's
just a hook hand.
It's a bloke in the boot with a hook.
Well, I can't believe we missed that.
It was Cropsey. Yet, it took quite a few years to shut Willowbrook's doors. The place was renamed the Staten Island Developmental Centre in 1974, and it took 10 more years for all of the patients to be discharged. Happy story so far.
I was going to say, I imagine this was one of those times as well when they were, just basically like you would be just locked up. I mean, it was a very similar situation.
They weren't very kind in the past, were they?
I mean,
Or now.
you know, the baseline level of arseholery is uncomfortably high currently, but yeah, certainly people got away with a lot more of this stuff in the past.
So, in 1972, a doctor who worked at Willowbrook was upset at the treatment of the patients. He slipped a local reporter, Geraldo Rivera. Hey, isn't he famous?
Well,
Geraldo.
I don't know if it's the same one, but if this is the guy with the moustache, he was the one we talked about. He's famous in America. He's sort of like does the old Fox News circuit, but he made his name he opened up
investigative journalism.
Investigative journalism. Yeah, well, he made his name by he bought access to what's it called, the vault of who was the gangster in the 20s and 30s?
Al Capone.
Yeah, Capone's vault, and it says this whole big thing. It's like, we're going to open it up now, and there was fuck all in there. But he somehow made his name out of this.
An old sandwich.
Because he became such a hype man. Yeah, it was just like,
It's also a couple of pornos.
you know, it's pretty much an empty garage. Oh, well. But yeah, they'd done this whole hype of opening up the vault of Al Capone, and then apparently there was like naff all in there. But anyway, he made his name off the back of that somehow. And
We've got some quite big names in this so far, haven't we? Kennedy.
Same one, yeah. Kennedy, yeah.
Geraldo. Wu-Tang Clan.
Wu-Tang Clan, yeah. I assume RZA and Jizza are going to pop up at some point. Are they all from Staten Island?
Jizzer's not. He's from Brooklyn. RZA is. ODB. I think Method Man is, yeah. I think so, yeah. But so a couple of them, ghost faces.
Yeah.
Just a little bit of Wu-Tang for everyone out there. Because I do love my Wu-Tang. So, Geraldo Rivera, they gave him a key to the horrid institution. Geraldo snuck in. Like Scooby-Doo. And he filmed what he saw there and broadcast it for the world to see. Patients, many of whom were children, lived in filth and disease. Cutbacks in funding had left the residents of Willowbrook at the mercy of a skeleton crew of staff, mainly untrained. Some of whom...
Actual skeletons?
They were skeletons, yeah. They were actual skeletons. Some of whom...
I think our hard-working skeleton community gets, unfairly derided often.
Yeah, I think so. They're doing their best, aren't they? The opportunities just aren't there for them.
Working themselves to the bone, Chris. Oh, good. I hate myself.
I'm leaving that in. Some of whom dedicated their careers to helping the disabled, and others who delighted in abusing the residents. Sad,
but I can imagine. Yeah, I know there's been. There was a report a while back. They were looking. I think it might be an old people's care home actually. But it's a really horrible one actually, because I can imagine it'd be sort of a stressful job. But I think unfortunately as well, if you're the sort of person who
you might get the wrong type of people.
Power, exactly. You get some people who are abusive in those kind of situations where they're people without power. Anyway,
I think it's really weird, the whole power thing, isn't it? Because See, the thing I say, I don't want any power, and that's true. But then I guess, if I'm being honest, the privilege which I have being a tall white man means that I probably have sort of latent passive power without thinking about it. So it's probably much easier for me to go, no, I don't really want it because... and
there's been various studies and real. I think the thing to always acknowledge is that that could be any one of us in a way, and you've got to keep those demons at bay and make sure you don't fall into that trap. Because I
constantly try and power play you on this by claiming you're a member of the Confederacy and that kind of stuff. So but that's because I feel like I'm punching up with you.
You'll break me one day, Chris. Don't worry.
Oh yeah, in every way. So the Skellingtons. Some of them were good and some were bad.
Yeah, as anything else, yeah. Skeletons, goblins.
Some good, some bad.
Some good, some bad.
Elves.
Rougarous, generally good.
Rougarous generally good. Yowies generally all right.
Yeah.
Generally all right. It's just
abominable snowman. Abominable, it's in the name.
The Tokoloshis generally don't get on with them.
Yeah. Poltergeists, fuck them.
Well, exactly. I won't have them in the house. There were also claims that experiments with hepatitis were conducted on site, resulting in infecting the patients who somehow escaped contracting the disease naturally. So,
yeah, and unfortunately, all of this is very believable.
yes,
Because there are documented evidence that these things have happened in the past.
Yeah.
Where you take a community, it's horrific.
So, where the legend of Cropseeeeey.
So Cropsey's going to have to do one to sort of get over this is going to be one of the humans of the real monsters after all, isn't it?
Yes.
Although I've got the feeling Cropsey's got something in him, if I remember the story correctly. Go on then.
And real life diverge is in the details, where the devil lies.
Mm.
The prime suspect in the murders, Andre Rand, was a former employee of Willowbrook, not a patient. Municipal employees did not conduct the stringent background checks and screenings they do today.
It doesn't sound like it was a place where they were too bothered about that.
Yeah.
What's the worst that can happen? A few patients die, Chris. Well, less work to do.
Exactly.
The rounds get a bit lighter. Well, there you go.
So, a famous escaped convict, Willie Sutton, changed his name and had worked for years at the New York Farm Colony. Due to budget cutbacks and abysmal working conditions, just about anyone could get hired at one of these institutions. Rand's first conviction. Yeah, exactly. Well, exactly. I doubt it's much different nowadays, really. To be honest.
I'll tell you a story about that. So when I used to work as a cleaner at a school when I was in sixth form. I have no idea what was happening, but there was a thing when we were sort of hire people. It'd be quite hard to get people sometimes. This guy turns up one day, and he'd worked for British Rail. He kept telling all these stories around, I've worked for British Rail, so this isn't hard work to me, blah, 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 all that. Despite the fact that he was crap at it, it was really like... It was first day, because he just...
It's not hard work for me. I don't even do the job properly.
Yeah, just like, do you want to actually demonstrate doing some of the work rather than telling us how hard working you are? I'm like, well, I didn't care. I wasn't running the thing, but just hear him saying this stuff. But then the thing is, everyone who does a job, because you're in a school, you've got to do a police check. Yeah. As soon as he found out about that, he didn't turn up for work the next day. So
really?
Yeah, it makes you wonder. I mean, it's probably just like, well, you would hope it was just kind of like a criminal conviction or something.
And I used to know someone who was going out with a friend of mine who worked in adult social care, like care homes, that kind of stuff. And he, every time I met him, was completely off his face on drink and drugs. And on more than one occasion, shat himself, having taken lots of ketamine. And he was like working with vulnerable adults. So, I mean, I'm sure he was. Unfortunately, I think that to a certain level, if you're willing to go and clean up other adults, having gone to the toilet and that kind of stuff, I don't think there's that many people who are willing to do it.
No,
so they're kind of like, as long as you're not, as long as you're not overtly dangerous, then, you're probably all right. So Rand's first conviction for sexually molesting a 9-year-old girl happened after he left employment at Willowbrook. However, one look at the drooling, bug-eyed Andre Rand outside the courthouse at his trials let you know something wasn't right with him.
Yeah, I've seen this photo. He certainly doesn't look like...
he's got some stuff going on.
I'll be honest with you, if he'd if I was interviewing, I'd probably pass.
You can't judge him. What if he had what if he was really good at like
he
business
really hates
talk?
the competencies. It's like,
yeah, exactly.
HR rules are rules.
Yeah, exactly.
He was drooling a lot, but
Yeah, well, I can. I do remember. I was once working for an organisation, and there was a lot of friction at the top table, and so I went in. I spoke to everyone individually and brought them all together, and then the team worked more harmoniously.
Well, I thought when he answered that question about conflict with others, I thought mentioning one where he'd murdered the entire board was really brave.
Brave decision.
It doesn't always work out conflict resolution, does it? So I think that was a strong competency for me.
So Andre Rand's mother had struggled with mental illness and had lived, like poet Allen Ginsberg's mum, at the Pilgrim State Asylum. With that in mind,
little Mr. Beats. What's this got to do with Ginsberg?
and had lived
like his famous poem Howl. He was howling himself.
Like my favourite poet, Allen Ginsberg. like his mother.
Good Lord, I know a thing or two about putting out a pretentious reference. But that was,
you certainly do.
Fuck me, even for me, that's precious.
So, with that in mind, his taking a job at Willowbrook would make sense. Many people who have experienced the suffering of loved ones go into the helping professions. He had no formal training on record, and despite claims that he was a physical therapist, Rand was just an orderly. Where Rand's story takes a really weird turn is in 1966. Rand left his job at Willowbrook, but not the grounds. He set a campsite.
This is going to go well. Oh, dear.
And he wasn't alone. Many more people, some who were never patients, lived on the Willowbrook site and that of the nearby Seaview Hospital and the New York Colony Farm.
Oh, renaming it Couldn't Give a Fuck Hospital.
Exactly.
You want to camp on the grounds, direct staff? So, yeah.
Even if you're not ex-staff, doesn't matter. Yeah. One of these institutions closed. Former patients
shouldn't have a Hooverville inside your hospital. That's all I'm saying. Anyway,
shouldn't have a Skid Row outside the vulnerable adults in the grounds. Once these institutions closed, former patients, along with other members of the homeless population, moved into the underground tunnels that connected the buildings and made the camp on the grounds outside.
And this is the thing, if you're architecting a building and you're putting in underground tunnels, this is what you've got to be wary of. It's going to end up with chads or serial killers. Yeah. You've got to think it through.
Later, some of this land would be sold to developers, and since 1993, the College of Staten Island has taken over 300 acres. Still, some of the abandoned buildings still stand, a decrepit witness, a constant reminder of the former use of the facility. Many still believe there are hidden human remains lying underneath the weeds, trash and brambles on the Willowbrook grounds. Again, that wouldn't be surprising.
You'd want to go and have a look, though, wouldn't you?
Well, me?
No, I mean, like, the place. So this...
No, they don't, though, do they?
Like, Fred West, when they caught him, they had a good rummage around the fucking basement, didn't they?
Yeah, but this is like a big institution, isn't it?
Well, it's like Time Team, Chris. You go out and do a geophysics. This would be a great episode of Time Team.
We believe there could be mass graves of disadvantaged adults here that died during experimentation, and we've got 72 hours to find it.
Well, it sounds like what looks like a promising spot here. We're on the geophys. There's definitely some calcium down there. So.
We got, Tony. I'm really excited. We're getting some real.
Don't hold me to this, but I think we're going to see some skulls before end of day.
Right. What all of Staten Island's victims had in common was their innocence. The only body found in a shallow grave on the Willowbrook grounds was little 12-year-old Jennifer Schweiger, a child with Down syndrome, whose remains are found after an exhausting 35-day search after her disappearance in 1987. Andre Rand was convicted of kidnapping Jennifer, but due to lack of physical evidence at the time, could not be pinned for the murder. Later, Rand was tied to at least 3 other disappearances. In 1972, 5-year-old Alice Pereira. In 1981, a 7-year-old named Holly Ann Hughes. Rand was later convicted of her kidnapping, but not her murder. An 11-year-old diabetic young girl named Tyahese Jackson. And in 1984, 21-year-old Hank Gafforio, a well-known friendly neighbourhood man who had mental challenges. The young Mr. Gafforio had helped search for Holly Ann Hughes and was caught on film during a newscast about her disappearances. 3 of the bodies were never found.
And they found this guy's body as well, the one who was searching for the other.
That's unclear. Okay. Yeah, it's unclear. I mean, that's what I think it's trying to say. The victims also deviate from the Cropsey urban legend narrative and even the Willowbrook child abuse story, as these children were never patients, nor were they scouts on a camping trip. They were snatched from their homes where they lived with loved ones who desperately searched for them.
Oh, so they weren't inmates at the hospital?
No.
So he was basically going out, kidnapping and murdering kids and then burying them in the grounds around where he...
Yeah.
Horrific either way.
So Staten Island pulled together as a community, and many are still searching for the remains of these victims so their families can have some semblance of closure. As for Rand, he's not talking, at least not about anything that makes sense. He had some bizarre correspondence with the makers of the Cropsey documentary law enforcement and newspapers. He set up interviews where he's serving time at Ossining Correctional, which is Sing Sing, only to refuse to see the visitors when they arrive. Many swear Andre Rand did it as he was seen in the proximity of all the victims. Others cry in his defence that it was a convenient frame-up. Unnamed and unlocated satanic cult members are also thought to be suspects.
Right. They don't exist, but yeah.
Yeah. Some say it may have been a former patient or group of patients who lived in the tunnels. The stories get wilder the more people weigh in on the matter. Due to the Cropsey connection, these crimes will forever be tied to an urban legend, though these cases of disappearing young people remain all too real for those who lived through this terrifying time. Whoever did these crimes left lasting scars on many residents of Staten Island.
I mean, that's horrific, obviously, because it's, you know, and you can imagine it's kind of like, because Staten Island would be a small enough community where you'd sort of feel that throughout, which is obviously awful. So the idea then is that, you know, that there were a spate of murders, and then the whole hook hand thing, there was just kind of embellishments and kind of like stories that kids would tell, you know, not probably being ignorant of the true nature of what had happened or whatever.
Yeah, and that he lived in the hospital in the tunnels or whatever. Yeah.
Not got a lot of light-hearted jokes to tell about this one.
It's a lot darker than it's pretty grim.
I say pretty grim. It's one of the worst things we've done, but hey.
Push through, I guess. The whispered stories of Cropseeeey and the documentary of the same name raises many questions as they answer. How many of the homeless live in
saying Cropseeeey? Is that from, because I know you've got the latest version of Mortal Kombat, is he in fact one of the downloadable characters?
Yeah, it's with a K.
Well, of course it's with a K.
He is, yeah. He's
Hook Hand himself.
Yeah, he's from, I don't know, the bullshit realm. I can't remember the name of them. Combat realm? Combat County
realm,
with a K?
Yeah. Realm, whatever.
So, how many of the homeless lived in the tunnels and surrounding grounds? So this is interesting because one subject which I was looking at and decided not to go ahead with, although it seems strange now, was mole people, right? Because
let's go with the
child killer. I mean, I'm not saying every decision I make is entirely correct. But mole people so I was thinking, what are they, like some kind of, you know,
it just makes me think of Hans Moleman from The Simpsons.
Yeah. But actually the mole people, they're not really an urban legend because there are actually people. Yeah. No, it's not. No, they're actually they're homeless people in New York who live in the tunnels.
Oh, okay.
Like in storm tunnels or whatever. And these people actually exist and there is a community of them, and sort of urban legends have kind of come up around them about them being mutants or whatever, but it's actually just homeless people finding a bit of shelter. So this kind of is a bit of that, isn't it? Fighting off giant alligators, befriending Ninja Turtles, you know, usual.
They're busy, those New York Steelers, aren't they? Fucking hell, there's a lot going on.
Fucking busy, yeah. Yeah, really busy.
Haven't got time cleansing any water or getting rid of any waste.
No, I don't do that anymore. Are there still... how many homeless people lived in tunnels surrounding the grounds? Are any still there, hiding in the remains of the ruins? Now, I would suggest probably...
Well, there's going to be, isn't there? And it doesn't sound like anyone in its prime, if I can laughably call it that, anyone was paying any particular attention to the upkeep of this place.
No.
Yeah.
And it's during its golden period.
It's hard to remember, you know. All right, yeah, there was a few murders that tore the town apart, but, you know, we were closer as family in those days.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
traditional values.
As far as the eye could see. At least one of them, Andre Rand, is known as a notorious serial killer who has actually never been convicted of murder. So he's never been convicted of murder.
He's never kidnapped and stuff like that. So they heavily suspect they didn't have like the evidence to actually. And it sounds like some people decided that maybe it was. I mean, who knows? Maybe it was rough justice, but
Well, so would today's advances in forensics help solve the mystery? provided more bodies can be found. How long did Andre Rand live on the grounds? Why did he change his name? Rand was born Frank Russian. Did he act alone? Will he ever confess? What was his motive? Some say his experience of working at Willowbrook launched him on a bizarre, twisted crusade to stop the suffering of little children, particularly those with handicaps. That Rand was employed to help children and then deliberately set out to hurt them is the scariest piece of the puzzle. Now, I mean, that does sound like serial killer nuts logic.
Yeah.
To an extent.
I mean, what's happened here, Chris, is you've taken what could ostensibly be an urban legend, but you've turned this into the true crime podcast.
Well, I mean, that's what people have been asking for, haven't they? I mean, you know, through the back door, I'm changing this into a true crime podcast. So, the mystery surrounding the missing residents of Staten Island didn't invent the story of Cropsey. It just added to the fuel of the horrible legend. So
does the Cropsey story go back before? I mean,
yeah,
because the whole hook hand thing, I mean, that's got to go back years, hasn't it? That's got to go back to the 60s or something at least, surely.
Yeah, 60s or 50s.
So is it just the whole hook thing? So this has got tied in and sort of in. You know, it's like, could he have been like the second coming? Well, maybe he could be like the X-Files geezer. He sort of like, you know, he'd just sleep in and come out and kill every 30 years. Or Stephen King used to do it, didn't he? Was it the clown?
Stephen King used to sleep and come out and kill every 30 years.
But he wrote books about it, possibly. It might be what I was attempting to say. No, I'm pretty sure he does this thing where, I don't know if it was just the Pennywise the Clown or he did other things, where you'd have, like, ancient entities that would sort of, like, they'd do a load of killing and then go and have a nice little sleep.
Like cicadas that kind of pop up every 10 years to sleep in their burrows and then, could be. I mean...
We go back to the 40s and see whether or not there was a spate of similar incidents.
I mean, you've got to have a certain level of the supernatural about you to be able to sleep for 30 years without eating or anything, haven't you? So what it sounds like is Cropsey was their hook hand legend, and that was the name, and then kids started disappearing and stuff, and then they said people going, oh, it's Cropsey.
What's done it?
Yeah.
It's not Cropsey, it's this fella bizarrely sleeping in the
allegedly.
Allegedly. Well, has he been done?
Not for murder. Not for murder. I don't know why I'm saying allegedly there when I constantly say he's the one person I don't want to sue me.
I don't think he's going to have particularly good legal representation, and B, I don't think anyone's going to really hold that gun against you, but fair enough. Like, that's the one hill you're willing to die on.
Whereas
for your mate Rand.
Whereas I've called out, like, the British royal family and stuff. So, a new updated version of Cropsey called Slender Man, a mysterious child-killing monster who lives on creepypasta stories all over the web and nightmares. He's an update for the times.
Well, not really.
No, I don't think so.
Isn't he one? I mean, I don't know that much. I mean, it was just a geezer on Something Awful Forums, wasn't it? Somebody came up with this like weird-looking photo, and then a load of laws come out of that. There's not much to it, but I thought it was.
Well, we'll look into Slender Man at some point. It's quite big.
But I thought it was just. We're not going to.
He gets teenage girls to commit suicide or whatever.
I thought he was more kind of like he'd sort of, you know. Yeah, he didn't kill kids, but he got them to murder for him or some shit like that. There was a real life case of. I mean, whatever. Yeah, as you say, we'll get into it on a future podcast. But no, I didn't think you.
Yeah, another fun one to look forward to. So
have to wade into internet territory at some point, sadly.
So he's an update for the times as the escaped guy story no longer holds credibility. Slender Man like Cropsey.
Oh, an interdimensional being
isn't real.
The Crops out of GIFs or whatever. Far more believable than he's got a hook hand either. He's like.
It would be wonderful if the Willowbrook School legacy of abuse and child abduction and murders weren't true either, but unfortunately they are all too true. So that's not much fun, is it?
Well, unfortunately, this is kind of like, it's come with a bit too much depressing real life. This one. Yeah,
so I'm going to quickly read. So, I appreciate the work that was put into the article, and so thanks for that. What I would say is, it was a slightly confusing read. So I'm going to quickly go through something on the lineup.com. which is kind of a bit more bullet
Maybe
pointy.
focused on the
and
hook hand adventures rather than the serial killer.
And this was published by the Line-Up staff in 2019. So, this is a story of a nightmare come to life. Once Cropsey was just an urban legend, the boogeyman of Staten Island in New York. Children were taught to fear the murderer who would kidnap them and take them into the tunnel system in the abandoned sanatorium nearby. Though terrifying, most people just thought of Cropsey as a legend, something parents told their children to keep them from straying too far from home. A tactic older siblings used to scare their younger brothers and sisters. But in 1987, the residents of Staten Island were rocked by the Cropsey legend becoming a real story when Andre Rand was unmasked as the real Cropsey killer. So, the Cropsey legend. So this is just because I don't feel like the article I read was very clear. I just
give a little bit more info on this one. I like how you're sticking to the Cropsey pronunciation. There's a bit of Matt Berry in there, I think.
Entirely, yeah, that's exactly what I'm doing. After the stick insect dente.
Right.
That's a deep cut. So, as the story goes, Cropsey was rumoured to be a homicidal madman, an escaped mental patient who had a hook for a hand, who haunted children and dragged them back to the tunnel systems that lay under the abandoned ruins of the old Seaview Hospital, a former TB sanatorium. Cropsey was very popular, alleged in the area. One summer camp variation on the tale inspired the 1981 slasher movie The Burning. The cult classic, surprisingly faithful to the tale that the Staten Island scouts once swapped over toasted marshmallows.
Yeah.
It featured a once respectable
man. You could taste
man
them well
named...
on your hook, couldn't you?
You could. Yeah, maybe that's what it's for.
You could make s'mores with it. Yeah, that'd be good.
He actually had it removed on purpose because he really, really liked toasted marshmallows.
Yeah, loves those.
It features a once respectable man named George Cropsey who goes insane after a prank gone wrong leaves him disfigured and begins killing unsuspected summer campers with an axe.
Listen, pranksters, just know your limits. Never let it go so wrong that you turn your victim into a serial killer.
We're just doing a prank. I'm going to put my hand in this blender.
Oh. Next thing you know, he's getting a hook attached and it's a killing hook.
Yeah, it's a killing hook, even though he kills people with an axe. So the hook's just practical.
He's kind of a pretentious serial killer, isn't he? He's just like a real affectation.
Got monocle on a penny farthing.
Look, mate, you could have had a prosthetic hand. That was up to you, wasn't it? Fucking peg leg the pirate. What are you on about?
So here's hopefully more clarification about Andre Rand. So he works as a janitor at the Willowbrook State School on Staten Island, a place whose name alone has the power to frighten adults and children alike. The institution, built as a respite for children with intellectual disabilities, was revealed to be a living hell in the 1970s, although authorities wouldn't close the school until 1987. The children had been subject to rampant sexual abuse and corporal punishment, and severe overcrowding led to unsanitary conditions. It was also a home to which had been called one of the most unethical medical experiments on children in the United States in the name of hepatitis research. Medical staff intentionally injected healthy children with the virus, many whom became severely ill as a result. The public wasn't aware of the conditions inside the school, given that many of the children inside had sadly been abandoned by their parents and the foster care system, leading to little accountability. In 1987, a young Geraldo Rivera published an expose that revealed the horrific conditions inside the Willowbrook State School and ignited a national scandal. So scandalous that it stayed open for another 15 years.
Yeah, but you know what? Like, if it's the same Geraldo Rivera, I mean, we've already talked about this, but...
good for him, yeah.
Fair play to him. He did something useful in one of his stories. Certainly not doing that these days.
The school was officially closed 15 years later, and negative publicity contributed to the successful passage of federal civil rights legislation that protected the mentally disabled and other people who had been institutionalized. So that's good.
Yes, something came out of it too little too late, but there you go.
Yeah. The same year, Andre Rand, former janitor of the School of Horrors, was arrested in connection with the disappearance of Jennifer Schweiger, a 12-year-old girl with Down syndrome. At the time, Rand was homeless and living in a makeshift campsite on the grounds of the abandoned school, not far from the ruinous Seaview Hospital that was so closely tied to the Cropsey.
I'll tell you what, though, Chris. Legend. If you're the guy who's running this place, that's another bit of bad news you don't need, isn't it? Like, look, seriously, I know we've been through some bad times.
Look,
we've had, all right, I put my hands up, it's been unacceptable.
Look,
I
might have taken my eye off the ball a little bit, right? A little bit. I've been having some trouble at home. You know, maybe I wasn't giving the job my full attention.
But going forward, I assure you, this is going to be smooth
I'm still the man. I'm still the man for the job.
You can trust in me. Okay, so we've found a serial killer paedophile living on your grounds. Oh, fuck you.
Oh, no. Oh, you're giving me a blinder behind the eyes. My wife's going to kill me.
George, what I always fucking tell you, yeah? George, groundkeeper's George, the security man, George, what I always tell you? We're searching the grounds for anyone living in a tent who might be a serial killer. It's basic, isn't it? It's fucking basic security.
No, all right.
Someone's got to go out there and face the fucking press on this one. I don't fucking need it. I'm up to here with this shit.
So, over a month after her disappearance, searchers found Jennifer's body in a shallow grave on the desolate school grounds where the drifter was living, and he was charged with murder. By that time, Rand already had a long rap sheet of crime against children. In 1969, he was sentenced to 16 months in jail for the attempted sexual assault of a 9-year-old. In 1983, he went to jail again after kidnapping a bus full of children from the local YMCA and driving them to an airport.
That's something out of a fucking Dirty Harry movie.
Take this bus to Cuba.
Honest, no, seriously, that is the plot of the first Dirty Harry movie. And when I saw that, it was just kind of like, oh, this is, some like stupid fantasy of some serial killer. Oh, because you wouldn't do something. Fuck me. Oh.
Well, I mean, he probably saw the film and thought, that's a good idea, that.
Why hasn't someone done this?
Yeah. Thanks very much, writers of Dirty
And do you know
Harry.
what? Because there was no magnum-toting cops who were happy to, keep on firing until the bullets run out.
Wearing a Punisher bulletproof vest, stuff like that. So, and although there wasn't enough physical evidence to charge him, police already suspected him in the disappearances of at least 4 other Staten Islanders going back more than a decade. Alice Pereira, 5, in 1972, Holly Ann Hughes, 7, who disappeared in 1981 and was last spotted with Rand on the day of her disappearance, and 11-year-old Taya Heath Jackson, who disappeared in 1983.
So I think we've established this guy's a horrific prick.
And Hank Gafforio, a mentally disabled 22-year-old who was last seen with Rand at a diner in 1984. To this day, none of the bodies have been found. So this is kind of clarifying everything which the first article didn't. We're getting this is a well put together picture of what's happened. The jury for Rand's case could not reach a verdict on the murder charge as there was not enough physical evidence of his direct involvement in Jennifer's death. However, they found him guilty of kidnapping, for which Rand received the sentence of 25 years in prison. Rand would have been eligible for parole in 2008, but in 2004, new evidence came to light linking him to the disappearance of Holly Ann Hughes. A fellow inmate took... Inmate? Yes, I do mean inmate, yes. It's quite difficult processing all this horribleness through your brain and out your mouth.
Yeah.
A fellow inmate took notes of the conversation he had with Rand, in which he later described in detail his abduction of the girl. Rand was convicted on a second kidnapping charge and given another 25-year sentence. He will not be eligible for parole until 2037, when he'll be 93 years old. Now, my understanding was that prisons are very violent places, and people who fuck around with children normally get stabbed up in American prison. That was my understanding. Cops and child molesters.
I think with any prison, I doubt he'd be flavour of the month, but he's
probably. Do you think he's not in Gen Pop?
Yeah, well, one would assume so. He's probably identified as a high security risk, isn't he?
So the real Cropsey story. Rand's story and that of Cropsey continue to fascinate and horrify tri-state residents to this day. Filmmakers Joshua Zeman and Barbara Braniccio grew up on Staten Island and listened to the terrifying Cropsey stories when they were children. As adults, their curiosity led them to dig deeper into the urban legend of Cropsey and the real case of the island's missing children. Their chilling documentary, Cropsey, explores the bizarre case of the bogeyman who seems to come to life. Cropsey includes interviews with people pivotal to the story, such as friends and families and members of the victims and detectives who try to solve the mystery of what happened to the children who mysteriously vanished. It also explores the question of Rand's guilt and the prejudices of society. In absence of hard evidence, trying Rand to foul play? Could it be that he was arrested simply because he was socially marginalised and had a prior record? His connection to the Willowbrook State School certainly didn't portray him in a good light, as the name alone provoked fear and suspicion, and that could have taken part in some of the horrific abuse that went on, and that he could have taken part in some of the horrific abuse that went on there. Was he truly the culprit, or was he just the perfect suspect to fit the Cropsey killer mould?
Who knows?
While the person who took Jennifer Schweigler's life probably wasn't an axe-wielding maniac with a hook for a hand like the Cropsey. Legend states her death and disappearance of 4 other vulnerable young adults were very real. Naive children may have believed in the gruesome tales their older siblings peddled, but Staten Islanders were truly shocked and something so horrific could happen in their communities. The tale of the Staten Island maniac is a reminder that there are all too real bogeymen lurking amongst us.
No, sadly true. Yeah, I mean, and again, that would, that would be a horrific thing to happen in the community.
So, I mean, this is a lot more horrible than I was hoping for, but I guess it's an interesting one from an urban legend point of view because a pre-existing.
So this is an urban legend that's effectively
been woven into.
I'm not sure,
and to be honest, they still don't really have solid answers as to what happened.
Well, yeah, it sounds like
they haven't found the bodies.
Some people might claim that there's some disputes around the disappearance and stuff like that.
Well, they haven't found the bodies.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So then difficult.
They've found one, and there's 4 they haven't.
Yeah.
So.
No, I mean, yeah. I mean, the thing is, I don't see how it ties into the whole Cropsey thing that well, to be honest with you. So obviously there was the hook hand killer thing is not just Staten Island. That's something that's sort of around all around the States, I would think. And
it's a bit of a
generic one. You would think. So it feels like me they're just playing up the urban. I mean, it doesn't really need a lot of playing up though. I think the story of well, it's not Ayn Rand, but whatever.
Ayn Rand, yeah,
and yeah, had been. It's sort of horrible enough already. I mean,
well, I think it's.
I mean, it's not like he had a hook for a hand or some shit. Do you know what I mean? It's just I get that that's an embellishment. I'm just not sure what the crossover with the urban legend is that much. This is just some horrific killings that occurred that have been conflated with.
Well, I think it's one of those where there's kind of urban legend there about someone in the mental hospital stealing kids and stuff, and then kids start going missing, and then people going, "Oh, it's Cropsey," to like their brothers and sisters, to.
Wasn't it? It was this chap, or
yeah, more than likely.
Yeah, more than likely.
So I think it's why it's interesting for me is that there's a pre-existing urban legend, and then stuff happens which broadly fits the narrative of this urban legend.
Brings to mind,
and then people have conflated the two to a certain extent and so you've kind of so it kind of makes the legend to an extent grow because you're actually adding real life events to it, even though it's a nonsense.
Yeah, it's one of those ones where there was a good phrase. I can't remember who came up with it.
I've not seen an urban legend like this before.
No, and it's kind of. I think it's kind of like one of those things where you're confronted with something evil like this, and then you're putting it into one of those terms where you sort of. But as I say, I can't remember who came up with this phrase. It was something.
Not a big fan of the term evil.
Well, I was saying is someone who came up with the phrase. It's something like the banality of evil. And it's just because there's this idea of you talk to these people and they're monsters and they're this, that, and the other. And a lot of them are like horrible, petty little men with horrible lives who are just kind of like.
A lot of the time, a lot. And, I think realistically, people who do horrible stuff normally have suffered some kind of abuse in their own lives, and that's not to say. Because plenty of people suffer abuse and don't do horrible stuff. But I think that there's a certain chemical imbalance in that person's brain and people can be triggered because brain chemistry is different. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do get where you're coming from. And
I don't think anyone in their right mind goes, I'm going to go and kill some kids. I don't think
agreed. And I think for me, yes,
that's why I don't really like evil as a term, because it's very fucking Abrahamic, good and evil, doesn't exist. But I think that, these people do need to, if they're in danger, they do need to be shut away. But I think that it's unhelpful not to just say, evil probably had the devil in him. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, I think if we're going to potentially stop stuff like this happening in the future, we have to understand more about where it comes from and what kind of person can be triggered and what are those triggers to lead them to do stuff like this, because then you can hopefully try and mitigate that in future.
Yeah, so I think from a judicial point of view, I think from a psychological point of view, so there are people who conduct studies into these kind of things, and as you say, psychologists who will sit down and talk to people who've done things like this and actually really try and understand and actually the root scientific cause of what caused this, what made you this kind of person, so you can try, could you actually intervene and actually stop before something like this happened? And I entirely agree with you from that perspective. I just think that once something like this has happened, I think there's a point at which people are beyond redemption for certain things that they might have done. I don't know. Well,
I think at the point where they've done something like this, I think unfortunately they're too far gone.
I don't think you can redeem yourself in the eyes of society. Let's put it like that.
No, and I think
don't necessarily have the right to at that point.
I think your brain's broken to a certain extent at that point. It's gone too far.
Yeah.
But I think that learning as much as you can, rather than just locking someone away and going evil, I think learning as much as you can is the best way of hopefully being able to mitigate this. It's like people who are like psychopaths. It's like psychopaths, sociopaths, right? There are people who are born like that. They don't all go and become killers and stuff. They just have a different brain chemistry where they don't necessarily understand empathy like the rest of us, right? But understanding that and understanding how they're different, right? And I'm not saying better or worse, they're different, then that kind of understanding can lead to perhaps mitigating circumstances where the difference they have in their outlook can become a problem. Do you know what I mean?
Oh yeah, no, and when I'm using use a term evil as very sort of metaphorically, and just I think something I can fully understand if you were in part of that community, you would react to this emotionally, and I wouldn't want to be hearing about logic at that point, or academia, or any of the rest of it. But I entirely agree with you in terms of things like prison policy, in terms of study of this kind of stuff, how you might prevent these kind of things happening. And I can't remember where I read it, but I did read an interesting article. There was a
and to be honest,
study serial killers and things like that, because it's a serious study to try and understand, as you say, what happened in their childhoods and things like this to make them like that, and that's something that warrants serious study. And
the thing is as well, like this, whatever it's called, this what's the school called? Millbrook or something? No. Willowbrook State School, right? It basically just sounds like it was set up, like it was almost like designed as a fucking misery factory. Do you know what I mean?
I think it's just out of sight. Well, to be honest with you, because it's like, I won't get into it too much, but I have a brother with mental disabilities. And I remember, even back in the 80s, they'd make him wear these shoes so he kind of stand out. I think my mum asking the doctors once, well, why's he got these sort of brown leather shoes with these weird sort of studs all over them? Well, why's he got to wear those? And it's just kind of like, oh, well, just so it was more or less saying something like, so people can identify him, like put a bell round his neck or something. Yeah, you know what I mean? It's got the attitudes, even sort of back in the 80s, were very unenlightened, shall we say? Towards anyone with any kind. It was just kind of like, well, they might, at best they're a nuisance, at worst they could be harmful. Therefore, they need to be isolated. And I think, probably some of the most vulnerable members of society. I mean, you get it at the moment, whenever the government will talk about people on benefits, blah, 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 what they're forgetting is benefits mean people on pensions, it means people with disabilities, it means, so before you
they don't give a shit, they really don't give a shit about people with disabilities. The amount of people that they put into abject poverty by cutting and often removing people's disability benefits in the last 10 years is just absolutely disgusting. I mean, I don't know, our government, man. I remember that there were someone was saying that, someone was criticising the government, and one of the success sort of things they said was, well, I think you find over the last 3 years, we've seen over 100 new food banks open to help people, and it's like, But before you came in, we didn't have food banks. No. People didn't have to go to food banks. And you're now going, oh, it's great, we've got more food banks now. And they're not putting any money into food banks. That's all people like me and you and my mum going down and giving stuff to food banks. It's not the government doing it. And they're going, well, we've got loads more food banks now. Like, that's a fucking win for us. It's like, no, that's absolutely a sign of how things are getting worse.
No, agreed. I think where I'm coming from is the fact, like quite a lot of people say, there's this idea of benefits as being this amorphous thing where it's just all being handed out to people who are taking the piss. Yeah. Now, there will be some people like that. Not
very such a small percentage.
There's always going to be. Well, you go to any kind of like office or any of the rest of it. There's feckless people, and who get away with stuff from God knows how. That's a proportion.
That'd be me.
There's a proportion of any kind of like whether it be the workforce or anything else, but. No, it's just, but that's it's an easy one of those euphemisms, isn't it? It's just like,
well, what it is it's a good way. It's like divide and conquer, isn't it? Like they kick down and then they tell other people who are struggling because of their policies that the reason why they're struggling is because of people who are even poorer than them. Yeah. Rather than looking at the people who are creaming all the fucking money out of the fucking government, all their mates. It's basic. It's really obvious sleight of hand. But so obvious that it's like
it works.
Like a 5-year-old who's just got like a magic set trying to show you a card trick. It's like that good sleight of hand, but somehow people fucking fall for it. It's unbelievable. Anyway, so Neil, let's go through our scoring system.
Okay, we'll keep this one brief. So, spookiness to start off with, I believe. Yeah. I mean, holy hell, you didn't do me a lot of Cropsey. You did me a lot of. Some awful serial killery guy. Well, presumably he's not actually been convicted of these things. I mean, just the whole thing was kind of like quite horrific, really.
I thought there was going to be more Cropsey in it than there actually is.
I was hoping there'd be a bit more some hook-handed fun, or a bit more like I know what you did last summer.
Whereas no, it's actually a terrible. It's a slamming indictment on society.
Yeah, it's just it goes from bad to worse. And actually, I think just the details around the edges, around disadvantages members of society. I mean, I understand it was originally probably built as a TB, what would effectively been a hospice back in the sort of 19th century, early 20th century, where people went to die, and actually, it was kind of a quarantine thing. That was how things had to work those days, because otherwise it would have infected other people. That's unfortunate for those people, but that's what you had to do. That was a tough measure you had to take. But then turning into kind of like, we'll just stuff a load of people who are disadvantaged and don't have money or power into those places, where inevitably they're going to, it's just awful. Yeah. So this is going to get, I mean, I don't know what else is going to merit a 10 on this one. This is a 10 for me. I mean, spookiness doesn't really... horrifying, I think, is the phrase I'd use.
Yeah. So, I mean, coming from the Cropsey angle, the story of some escaped mental patient with a hook for a hand, kidnapping kids and taking them to the tunnels is quite spooky, and then it ratcheted up when it actually started happening. So,
really took it to the next level.
Yeah, and then you're looking at all the stuff around it, like you said. It would be a 10 for me if it wasn't so, unfortunately, a story that's been told many times in many countries. So I'm going to go for an 8. So believability. So again, the hook-handed person stealing kids and taking them to tunnels seems quite unbelievable until some nutter started doing it, right? So the believability is actually quite high as well. So I'm going to go, unfortunately, because there isn't really anything paranormal or anything in it to take any of the stuff off, is there? Because the only reason why I'm taking a point off is because it wasn't actually Cropsey, but the story unfortunately did ring very true, so it's going to get a 9 for me.
Yeah, I'm going to go slightly lower on this one because I'm weighing up the Cropsey, the hook-handed thing, which is, so on the one hand you have a genuine serial killer here, which is sadly all too believable and did happen. So that's where that is. But I'll balance that with the sort of the hook hand thing, which because he didn't, there wasn't a hook for hand. So I'm playing the urban myth as well. Long story short, it'll be an 8 from me.
8, okay. So Reach, Neil.
So the hook hand killer thing, I mean, it's been in like movies like it did last summer. There's various campfire tales and things like that. I think it's a well-known one. I think I'd roughly had heard this one. This is one of those ones where it's, as you say, an intersection between where urban myth becomes real. Unfortunately, in this case, takes a little bit of the
fun out of it.
Yeah, it does take the fun. But no, I think it's God. This is going to become our highest scoring one, isn't it? It's depressing. I think it probably does have. So I don't think the was it Andre Rand or something? Was the
Ayn Rand.
Ayn Rand. Yeah, that's before she wrote all of those awful books. She decided to.
She wrote them in. She wrote Atlas Shrugged in the tunnels underneath an insane asylum.
Yeah, I wouldn't. Do you know what? I wouldn't. If this was her dark origin story, it would not surprise me. Ended up on Medicare. Think about that, Ayn Rand fans. Didn't live up to your values, did you? No.
I would imagine there aren't many Ayn Rand fans who got very far into any of our podcasts.
I can't imagine that too much. A couple of fucking undementures like us, I don't think we'd be too approved of. Yeah. No guilt sus. Anyway, Reach, it's got to be pretty high, isn't it? I'm going to... it's not right up there with all the big famous ones, but it'd be a 7 for me, I think.
7. Yeah, so I think it's... The Cropsey one is pretty well...
Still committed to that.
Still committed to it.
To the bitter fucking end.
To the bitter end. So I think that's known around probably New York, which is a populous city. I imagine the murders and stuff are pretty well known because even in like a big city like New York, stuff like that does stick out. Do you know what I mean? Like kids...
It's happened every Wednesday. Kids, yike. Strangely proud of the fact.
The hook hand thing is pretty well known as well. But it's not that old, etc. So I'm going to go with a 6. So, narrative premise. Horrifying. Unfortunately, there's no joy in this at all. The hook hand thing, I guess, is one which has been used a lot. I mean... I don't know. I mean, it's not good. It's not good narrative premise, but it's strong.
I think there's quite a lot here. Actually, I think I'm depressing. I'm going to have to do this quite high, but yeah,
I'm going to give it a 7 and not think about it ever again.
Exactly. Yeah, no, exactly. Because I don't think I necessarily want to explore this story too much, but no, I think there's shed loads in there. There's, the hook-handed killer thing. Obviously, there is all of that. There's the idea of an urban myth becoming real. You've got some, you get really meta and scream like that. You've got, the horrific details of this person themselves, whether or not they were detailed of murder. I mean, if he's doing shit like kidnapping a bus full of kids, I mean, for fuck's sake.
Yeah.
Clearly not in innocence.
He's ambitious, isn't he?
Yeah. I'm not going to can't bring myself. Anyway, but then just also all of the sort of like, what would have been a part of a much broader picture of kind of institutionalised abuse.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, we've got horrific legacies of that in the UK from similar periods as well, as we're learning to our detriment over the last 10 years or so. Look up Jimmy Savile, anyone.
And there was that place, there was that place in Ireland where they found the mass grave, wasn't there, where they, the unwed mothers.
Oh, is this where the Magdalene
the nunnery?
Yeah. Unfortunately, with a lot of these places, there was far too much deference to authority in an age where we seem to be sliding back into authoritarianism and sort of like
don't bother learning any lessons from the past.
Actually, maybe you want to think about when we were very deferential to authority in the past. These are the kind of consequences we had, sadly. So yeah, I think it's quite a rich narrative. It's not a nice one, so it's going to be an 8 for me, Chris.
Okay, and that gives it a lovely high score of 63, which is one of the higher ones. Fantastic. Well done, Cropsey. Well, so if anyone made it through this tale, well done. You've got a
gold star for us.
Gold star, and you've got a strong
perseverance badge.
A perseverance badge, yeah. So I don't really have anything jolly to lead us out with. But yeah, we'll be back next week with hopefully one which is a little bit more funny, because it was very difficult to wring out too many laughs out of what is essentially a horrible sound.
You could have made inappropriate jokes, it just really didn't feel like it, because,
it's not really. I'll be honest with you. My sense of humour doesn't really stretch to laughing about child murder.
No, I think we can all back that.
Okay. Well, if you're Cropsey and you want to confess, then please send us an email at herb.legends.podcast@gmail.com. But beyond that, maybe listen to something silly like Pigman or something to cleanse your palate before you go on with your day.
Maybe we stick an extra warning on this one, Chris, before we publish it.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, have an enjoyable rest of your day. Hopefully we've brightened it up for you, and we will see you next week. Goodbye.
Goodbye.